CV is a critical document, because really when the employer looks at your CV, that's the thing that's going to make them decide whether you get the interview or you don't get the interview. The key differences between an academic CV and a standard CV come mostly down to the content. So there is content in an academic CV that you would not have in a standard CV. And some of those main points that should be in your academic CV include that you have more detail about your qualifications, about your degree. If you have a research component, you may give an abstract of your thesis, and in fact you may attach that as an appendix. One of the difficulties with academic CVs is putting too much detail, and even though it's a longer CV, we don't want to go overboard with the amount of detail. Secondly, you might have some more detail if you've had any teaching experience, assistant lecturer, helping out in class, or other research activities you've been active in. And also research techniques. So particular strategies and techniques of research that you have a competency in, that you're good at, those should be mentioned in your CV too. And other things like publications. If you've helped to write a paper, you've had a paper published, if you've presented or co-presented at a conference, those sort of things. And also any fellowships, awards, if you've won some funding to do research, belong to a professional organisation, any of those professional details need to be in the CV as well. And then also thinking to the future. So what are your future plans for research? Where do you see your current project heading? Where would you like to go in the future? That sort of thing. And probably the last thing is referees. Now, you're going to have referees anyway in your CV, but for the academic CV, we want them to be very relevant to academia. So you need to make sure that it is your professor, your supervisor, your past lecturers that are your referees. We really strongly suggest that you don't use your academic CV for other kinds of jobs, for the standard jobs that I've talked about. It really is not relevant, and a lot of the information won't be of interest to those employers, and it's far too long for most employers who are really just looking for those 2 to 3 pages. So there are 5 key things that are really important to consider about your CV. First one is to do with presentation. We need to make sure that our CV is professional looking. We need to be able to see a nice, neat, tidy presentation, that things are aligned neatly down the page. Your font, for example. Use the same font and the same font size for each block of text. If we have different and unusual fonts too much, it becomes very distracting. In fact, think of your CV as being that first impression. Everybody knows first impressions in an interview situation are crucial. It's the same for your CV, except the CV is the very first thing they're going to see. So if your CV doesn't look professional, that's sending them a message already. The second point is that your CV really has to be completely error-free. Any mistakes, whether that's in grammar, spelling, punctuation, factual details, they will maybe accept one small error. Anything after that, then I'm afraid your CV goes into the forget about it pile, which is usually the rubbish bin next to their desk. So you really need to make sure that you've had it triple checked. Ask other people who are used to checking CVs to look at for you. So my third point is personal details. And sometimes people come from different countries where they're very used to putting a lot of information, age, gender, nationality, and so on. Most of this information, we really advise that you leave this out. It won't help, and often it will invite the employer to unfairly discriminate. By law, they're not allowed to do that, but unfortunately what we know is that if you give them the chance, they will be tempted to. So really the main things they need to know is how to contact you, your postal address, your phone numbers, and your email address. The one thing I would add to that is your eligibility to work in New Zealand. The employer is entitled to know what kind of visa status if you're an international student. So do make sure you mention you're eligible to work in New Zealand and so on. On a similar vein, photos. This is a real topical issue. A lot of people think you shouldn't put a photo on a CV, and this is our standard advice for the same reason as those personal details. It's going to invite somebody to make a judgment about you purely on that image that's on the page. And even if it's a good photo, if the person doesn't like the way you look, then again your CV gets put in that other pile. So in most cases, don't put a photo on your CV. And the fourth key point is relevance. You really need to make sure that what you put in your CV is relevant to the position you're applying for. That means you've had a good look at the job description, you know what that employer wants, and you've focused in on the skills that you can provide that they're looking for. Another thing to consider to do with the relevance is that you need to market these skills. It's not just about saying, I have skills in A, B, and C. You need to be promoting your strengths. And you need to be clear in your own mind what you are actually good at. There's a list of skills that you will have been developing while you've been studying during your postgraduate studies. And it's important that you bring as many of these as you can in. For example, conceptual and critical thinking abilities, research, information management skills, the ability to communicate complex information simply, and make sure you're doing that on your CV. Don't get too complex on your CV, by the way. Organisation and planning skills, public speaking, presentation skills, negotiating, influencing, the ability to innovate and propose new ideas and methods, and advanced computer skills such as specific software packages that you might have used through your research. So all of those skills, or as many of them as you can claim, or as many of them as you have strengths in, make sure they're included on your CV as well. And the last point is really about experience and giving evidence of the skills. Because anybody can write on their CVs, yes, I have great communication skills, I'm a good team player, I have advanced research skills. The employer really doesn't know if that's true or not. So what you need to do is give them evidence. Think about where you've had experience with that skill. Maybe you've researched towards your current research project. Maybe you've assisted your lecturer with presenting to the class. Think of examples, and these examples will be about all kinds of skills, not just these academic ones that we're talking about. So when you've had a part-time job, a holiday job, any kind of work experience, even voluntary experiences, they need to be mentioned so that you can give evidence of your skills.